Ancient Egypt is typically taught as a sequence of stable, unified empires. But between the 13th and 17th dynasties, that continuity breaks. The state collapses. For centuries, historians relied on Hellenistic writers like Manetho and Flavius Josephus to explain this gap, naming it the Hyksos Period. According to these accounts, Egypt fell victim to a sudden, devastating military invasion from the east, led by a foreign group known as the Shepherd Kings. The archaeological record does not support a violent conquest. The centralized government of the late Middle Kingdom simply degraded from within. This map illustrates the resulting geopolitical landscape. As central authority decayed, the empire splintered along the Nile into three distinct concurrent states: Avaris in the delta, Thebes in Upper Egypt, and Kerma in Nubia. Reconstructing how these three kingdoms interacted is difficult because the official written administration of the Egyptian state effectively vanished. Without those state records, we have to map the new political borders by tracking granular shifts in material culture, specifically variations in ceramicware and domestic architecture. Understanding this era requires a shift in evidence. When the texts vanish, we map the transition of power through the layers of dirt, the small clay seals, and the pottery left behind. The single most important text we do have for mapping the chronology of this era is the Turin King List, drafted centuries later during the reign of Ramesses II. But the document survives severely shredded, making the ruler sequence highly debatable. Kim Ryholt reconstructed it by matching horizontal papyrus fibers across torn edges to lock fragments together. However, critics argue some names read as Semitic, belonging to a different dynasty. To work around this textual dead end, Egyptologists turn to sigillography, the study of seals. Researchers build a working timeline by cross-referencing the partial names salvaged from the Turin papyrus with the artistic evolution of thousands of recovered scarab seal stamps. This era's chronology relies on analyzing torn papyrus fibers alongside the design typologies of tiny carved beetles. Moving north to the eastern delta, we find Tel el-Daba, capital of the Avaris kingdom. During the late Middle Kingdom, this city operated as a major Egyptian harbor. Over time, it became populated by a wealthy, free community of Levantine merchants navigating Mediterranean trade routes. This cross-section shows an organic demographic shift. Egyptian architectural plans at the bottom steadily evolve into Levantine structures at the top. Here, potters crafted Levantine-style ceramics using local Egyptian clay. Outside the tombs, horses and sheep were buried, adhering strictly to Near Eastern traditions. Eventually, the leaders of this established immigrant population recognized the weakness of the central state and peacefully seceded. They adopted Egyptian royal ideology and took the title Heka Kasut, meaning rulers of foreign lands. As an independent state, Avaris leveraged its existing position as a maritime hub to maintain vast economic networks extending deep into the Near East. We track that reach through artifacts like this dark stone lion inscribed with the Avaris King Kian's name, discovered hundreds of miles away in Baghdad. The historical Hyksos were a prosperous immigrant community. They used their economic leverage to separate from a failing government, rather than invading by force. Meanwhile, in Upper Egypt, the traditional Egyptian state contracted to form the isolated Theban kingdom.
The rulers at Thebes viewed themselves as the direct heirs to the late Middle Kingdom. They attempted to sustain the old centralized administration, but were operating with severely reduced resources. Without access to the wider empire, everyday administrative and religious practices localized. Local elites who previously sent private monuments to Abydos began installing them in nearby regional sanctuaries instead. Geopolitically, the Theban kingdom was trapped. They faced the wealthy state of Avaris to the north and a rising Nubian power to the south. You can see the reality of this defensive posture in the stonework. This fragmented monument, the Stela of Bebionk, comes from a remote Red Sea outpost, reflecting a state forced to secure its immediate rocky borders. Later royal texts from Thebes, specifically the Kamose stele, read as highly charged propaganda. They vividly detail a militarized kingdom locked in constant border skirmishes, desperately trying to protect its shrinking territory. The Theban state survived this era as a highly militarized remnant, holding its ground in a vice between two larger political entities. To understand the pressure on the southern border, we have to look past the Third Cataract to the Kingdom of Kerma. Following the reign of the Egyptian king Sobekotep IV, the rulers of Kerma systematically exploited the power vacuum, taking control of the massive chain of fortresses Egypt had built in Lower Nubia. This map tracks their massive expansion from the Fourth Cataract through Lower Nubia. Kerma possessed the largest territorial footprint on the Nile. The map also reveals an active alliance with Avaris, evidenced by distinct Lower Egyptian pottery and scarab seals found deep within Kerma territory. By coordinating through trade routes in the western desert, Avaris and Kerma conducted commerce directly with one another. This axis completely bypassed the Theban kingdom, cutting them out of the regional economy. The Kingdom of Kerma was a highly organized superpower. Through military expansion and strategic economic alliances, they effectively cornered the Egyptian remnant. With no central authority, the Nile Valley experienced asynchronous cultural evolution, resulting in distinct ceramic typologies isolated within each kingdom's borders. We track the end of the period by watching those regional borders dissolve, as these independent cultures were slowly subsumed back under Theban control. The kings of early Dynasty 18 mounted successful military campaigns, eventually dismantling the kingdom of Avaris in the north and subduing Kerma in the south. But the unified state they built did not mirror the isolated, inward-looking government of the Old Middle Kingdom. By conquering Avaris, the victorious Thebans absorbed an incredibly lucrative, pre-existing network of Mediterranean and Near Eastern trade. From their southern campaigns against Kerma, they learned how to administer and maintain a massive territorial footprint through aggressive military infrastructure. The victory at Avaris did not restore the isolation of the past. It locked Egypt into the systems and trade networks of its former rivals. The fragmentation of the Second Intermediate Period decentralized the Nile. When Thebes finally reunified the valley, it did so by integrating the maritime connections of the delta and the territorial scope of Nubia, turning an inward-looking kingdom into the globally connected, expansionist empire of the New Kingdom.